Hello, everybody. Good to see everybody on. Lots of news this week. So we have a previous special speaker on, Ron, and then Austin is coming on. Good to see returning people, new faces, Connie, Eduardo, Thomas. Feel free to unmute yourself. Come on.
Hey, Kevin, nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. So people will be falling in. So the news this week is basically sensing and the training data. So this is an article in Nature. It says generalization and quantum machine learning from few training data. So that's pretty awesome. So obviously you require less data for training. So that's the one. And then as far as the sensing, there's this, it's kind of a breakthrough. It seems like it's in Nature as well, measuring currents in the heart at millimeter resolution with a diamond quantum sensor. Now, I believe currently we do centimeter resolution. So I'm going to post that in the chat as well. So between those, very exciting times here. So we got Tim coming on. Let's see. Good to see you, Tim. And then I guess going back to sensing, back on the 8th of this month, there was, what they did is they took audio waves that have noise, like the Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream, and they made them really clear. So it's the same, it's the nitrogen vacancy diamond quantum sensor that they're using. And I've been doing research on this, and this type of sensor goes back to maybe 2015. Do you know about this, Tim, as far as this type of sensor? And then, yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Okay. So I'm sorry, we're talking about a nitrogen vacancy sensor. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, they take diamond and omit a carbon for nitrogen.
Oh yeah, I've heard about these diamonds that like they emit some kind of an atom, and then they use that for a qubit. But I really don't know much about that.
They take a diamond and they bombard it with ions so that ions create cavities, vacancies they're called, nitrogen vacancies in the diamond. And so there's a way to place qubits there so somehow they cohere for enough time to be useful. Michael Lukin at Harvard does a lot of work on this, and the reason I know a bit about it is because there's a nice talk. I'll put a link to it in the chat. He talks about this thing in particular, among others.
It's very interesting in the methods of these papers. They say it's like, you know, a small little diamond that's treated whatever, and it's like, so like 99.998% pure or something like that, or maybe one more decimal. But it's just very interesting because I did not expect this. I didn't think anything of this technology. And now they're claiming that, well, when it has coherence problems like everything else in quantum. And in one of these, they had a problem with like a line amplification. But it didn't seem like much as far as holding the technology back. And again, these are two papers in both in Nature, both this month. So it seems like something to get excited about.
You guys know that there is a quantum network between Harvard and the Lincoln Lab at MIT, and one of the repeaters, it has, you know, several nodes, and one of the nodes is based on a diamond thing, you know, somehow it repeats the photon. I don't know a lot about the details.
Yeah,
but it's a single photon thing.
You know the length, Philip?
Yeah, it's a few over 10 kilometers, but not very much.
Okay. Yeah, they're all, I don't think, too very long. I did find some more China news as far as all these, the same kind of thing. They have a bunch of nodes in between all these. It's not like, I think it's over 200 kilometers. And this was like a couple years old. And the professor, I think he's pretty well known in quantum. And he speaks very highly of the Chinese quantum networks. So I guess the biggest thing that we have is DCQNet thinks that we'll have a national quantum network. And then Fermilab and Argonne are already transmitting quantum and classical information all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And we probably shouldn't forget Northwestern University has a point-to-point from its Chicago campus to up to its North Shore campus. Also, I want to mention that the Washington D.C. group has a couple of talks coming up about the networking stuff. So hopefully there'll be some some good details in those talks.
Yeah, it's very interesting as far as like you have that, you have sensing, you have communication, or you have security, as a network security, that kind of stuff too. So Eduardo, how do you relate to quantum the most these days?
Hey, not too much except for transportation wise, and as far as logistics, with the implementations of the end-to-end points. That's how I relate to it. I'm just want to learn more about it and kind of how it works, and I'm always learning new things, look and investigate. So that's how I relate.
Very cool. So we have some new faces here. Feel free to unmute yourself. We still have people coming on. I see Connie, Thomas, Austin's returning as well. So you can, if you have questions about quantum, or we could keep talking about headlines as well. Go ahead, Andre. Yeah, you could go ahead.
That's good. Oh, are you asking me?
Yeah. Do you have a question or want to share basically anything quantum?
No, actually, this is my first time when I joined the group. I even don't know what's. Well, I have idea what it's about because I read the description. So my particular interest in combination in neuroscience and quantum computing. So, and my background is in physics. I don't have any questions at the moment because, again, I just simply don't know the topic of today's discussion.
Yeah, so the discussions could be anything. There's a lot of technical talk. So Ron Schreiner kind of led a couple weeks ago, and then he covered kind of like the history of conventional computing, and then basically how we're kind of ahead in software as opposed to where they were back then. So that's an analogy he made. So Philip, he's a previous speaker too. He talked about marketing, so quantum and marketing. So he's an expert in that area as well. And obviously the headlines, like everything's breaking. On June 1st of this year, there was Xanadu, a company in Toronto, photonic space. They said they did something in 36 microseconds that would have taken 9,000 years. And then the National Science Foundation forecast of a practical quantum computer by the end of next year as well.
I actually, sorry, if you were going to go. I have a question about, you said quantum and marketing. What articles or what sources would you recommend for that? Because that's definitely something I would want to learn much more about. I'm in sales myself, so.
He's actually on the discussion. His name's Philip.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hey,
Eduardo, I'll be happy to chat to you about all this. I'll put my LinkedIn link in the chat. And by the way, guys, I just put the YouTube link to the Mikhail Lukin talk that I mentioned. It's highly, educational. It's just recent, I think a month old, and it touches on some recent breakthroughs in quantum. So I really enjoyed it.
And for those just joining, the news this week is this Nature article. It keeps popping up, generalization in quantum machine learning from few training data. I'm going to post that one again. And then obviously with a quantum medical sensor as well, achieving millimeter resolution in a rat's heart invasively.
So, hello, good evening, everybody. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our speaker today, and I hope they will have an enjoyable.
so, you know, there's just a number of things kind of like swirling in the air. Now, if you look at something like quantum algorithms too, if you're super technical, most of those are waiting for the awesome quantum hardware. So that's just where things are. Sensing might be a little bit ahead at this point, and then obviously like communications network is interesting too. The interesting thing with that is we have a fiber optic network, and one runs on fiber optics, so it's not like reinventing the wheel this time. It seems like so. Also, this is another Q control. So Q control, they say they launch a new division to create advanced software-defined quantum sensors. Does anybody know what that means? What is a software-defined quantum sensor?
Well, maybe it follows in the footsteps of software-defined radio, where instead of having radio gear, you basically have it simulated in software, or you have software algorithms to watch an RF signal, for example, and instead of having mechanical tuners or amplifiers that have narrowband notch filtering, the software in real time can figure out what frequencies are in that RF signal. So it's probably something along those lines, where there's some simulation involved, and there's some analysis. It's watching some sort of signal and using software to pull out the specific frequencies or what would be akin to the specific frequencies.
Thank you, that helps. You said software in real time for sure. Now this other one that keeps popping up is silicon spin qubits. So the goal with this is basically, it's one of the whatever 9 or 10 hardware technologies in quantum that you can develop on existing semiconductor lines. So manufacturing. Last time I checked, I think it had a couple qubits, and there was an article again in Nature. Usually Nature, it's really hard to get into, quantum error correction with silicon spin qubits. So that one's worth checking out. I haven't had a chance to read every single one of these. I'm focusing kind of on the sensing for like medical application, but it's definitely worth taking a look at, just depending on, you know, what area you're in, you want to go into, those types of things as well. So the other stuff, I noticed everybody here, as far as I know, is on LinkedIn. So I wanted to share something here. Let's see. I presented this on Womanium. So if you haven't seen Womanium, they had a Nobel Prize winner. It went on for like over a month. It was called Womanium Quantum. It's a women's tech organization. Now, Marlu Slot was a speaker on this discussion. And then she and Prachi, they both, had all these speakers on almost every single day. So it's a very exciting thing to see that there's so many different conferences between Quantum Latino, these types of things. So you should be able to see this. So this is a keynote that I gave not too long ago, so this month. And the big thing is everybody wants to get more and more connections on LinkedIn for one reason or another. So it's very exciting that we're having this next type of quantum or next type of computing technology just keep, people are adding and requesting all these types of things. Now, the number one thing to think about is that your colleagues are concerned about their networks. So anybody that pulls these, when you have your profile together, is that they want to see something that'll add benefit to them. Okay. So the key in doing a lot of these things is basically to feature and recommend others. It's hard because everybody wants to go and share, right? Like exactly just what they have. Now, in the startup world in San Diego here, we call it caring, sharing, and daring. So caring on LinkedIn is you're not blasting like on Facebook, like some people do. But obviously sharing is the hardest part because you create new material, you want to keep it by yourself, these types of things. And it's really hard to share because it feels like you're giving away your firstborn child that you just gave. But in order to get to places, you keep on having to share awesome material to the point where they think that you're an expert in the technology. And daring goes along with sharing. You do have to take risks. Like I just shared like a pitch deck with people at the university here. And it's just, there's no way of getting in unless you're constantly in contact with people that, or you're trying to get to the right person, but oftentimes you can't get to them. You see what I mean? Now, the other thing is knowing when to be brief. It's very hard. I have a tendency of just maxing out the characters on LinkedIn. And a lot of times just a shorter post or a little quote might be good too. So I chose two profiles here. So Araceli and Salvador. And as you see, they're well advanced in quantum. Now, when you look through their profile, you'll see sprinklings of, highlights in quantum. Both have a cover photo. There's no reason not to have a cover photo. And both pictures have a solid color background. It's the LinkedIn thing, it just looks good, indoor, professional. I've tried other things like an event at a party, and I had a hard time. People recognize you better if it's just plain in the background and something professional as opposed to something that kind of like catches your eyes. So, throughout your profile, you want to show that you have some aspect of quantum in you. So if you're trying to build a quantum network, the people adding you will want to see, what have you done in quantum? Now, I like Marlu, so she's a speaker on the discussion. She has a positive profile picture. Her about section is detailed. She praises her colleague. And they also have future quantum events, coming up. So that's a huge thing as well. And she details her progression through NIST. So she works with NIST. And she's gotten into quantum a lot, so which is really good to see. So this is just another page, but if you ever check out her profile or anybody else's, it's basically saying like, if you want to be in quantum, either if you don't have the education, if you don't have the experience, those types of things, do little medium posts, speak on discussions, those types of things as well. And then John Barnes has spoken on the panel too. So you could see people supporting him through recruiting, technical recruiting, quantum mechanics. You choose what skills to post, and then other people feature you. So it's a very interesting thing that you kind of have control over the whole thing, but people are looking for the specific area in physics, computer science, math, and especially quantum. And another thing here, so in his profile, he has recommendations, and you could see that they're relating to different areas, or the people posting are PhD student, co-founder, and developer. And you have the same thing too when you evaluate other people's profile, is you want to look at what other people are saying these types of things as well. So these are top 10 principles. So be specific on the things that matter, okay? It's really hard, and actually I put this in here, number 7, remove hard-earned, irrelevant information, right? Most people don't want to see it. I know that's the hardest thing because you work so hard to put on it. But if you're trying to attract a quantum crowd, you're trying to focus on that thing. It sounds simple, but trust me, when you're just off in the wild on your computer, it's not always that clear. Another thing is basically, instead of hiring many companies, just work harder, right? Study harder, look at publications, post, speak, all these types of things. And it's not all about just you or your company. So you can post, feature other people in their posts, those types of things. Now, number 4 is interesting because when you type something on the computer, it doesn't always look the same on the phone. So sometimes if you're trying to go for a really good looking post, check it on your phone, check it on the computer, and it tends to date better, at least on mine, on the computer. Now, projects number 5 is key. If you don't have experience, education, you could tag 20 people. As far as I have one that it's like 13 people. We all did something. It's like a San Diego kind of tech kind of helping kids with robots and programming, that kind of stuff. But that was the perfect example to put that there. And it didn't take a degree, and it didn't take 5 years of experience. Also, you can audit online courses from a bunch of, Harvard, Stanford, probably Yale as well, and University of Michigan. I'm taking one in neuroanatomy. You just don't pay for it, so it's called auditing. Number 7, remove. Yeah, we've talked about that. Hashtag tag. That's pretty much self-explanatory. Number 9, talk. People want to hear you talk, and then also attend, learn, teach, and you want to be in the position where you're helping other people, maybe in 6 months. So if you set like a good goal like that. Now, these are some of my top posts. So you see, it's all about other people. It's not about yourself. So with Michelle, she's been on the discussion. She had gotten a new position, and that's actually my top views and my top expressions for that one. John Martini's, I really wanted to find out more about him. So when you're doing research in quantum, you might as well post about it, right? Just turn it into a post. And then this Quantum Latino, this was my most probably shared. So this was like a 3 or 4 day event a couple months ago. And people just love this one. I made the graphic from their pictures, and actually I had to do some editing, but it's basically quantum as a world event. Now, you could also do all this stuff and, locally, you could build up a quantum network and then have red ribbons, all these types of things as well. And, this just further explains, basically what I've been through. But the conclusions are same as the ones in the beginning. Your colleagues are concerned about their networks. So feature and recommend others to gain credibility. Be caring, sharing, and daring. It's a combination. Know when to be brief. People won't read it if it's too long. Sometimes you do have to get things out. And people really, the really technical people want to see something that's like a full post. And in that case, it's fine. But a lot of times it's brevity's better. And it's something that I've had to learn over time, just because I just tend to be a little bit long-winded. So I hope hopefully that helps. So I know a lot of you are like, if you're on this discussion, you're wanting to grow in quantum. If you haven't kind of identified the areas of quantum that, you have sensing, computing, networking, all these types of things. If you haven't identified it yet, then, feel free to ask a question. There's a number of people that I would say are getting to be an expert if they're not an expert already on the panel. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you. So feel free. So Dave came on. So Dave's, I believe, in Toronto. And then go ahead, Dave.
Oh, thanks, Kevin. Let's get the video going here. Always a fan of your presentations. I like the practical tips. I like meeting everyone else who's on these presentations. So my background is I'm a co-founder with Dr. Faisal Shah Khan of Dark Star Quantum Lab in North Carolina State University, physically situated. Actually, that's where he's teaching as a professor at Schema Business School. And I just found out tonight, and I was late, I was speaking with him, that he started a quantum AI group at the university, which is very nice. So really, this is all about, as you said, Kevin, those who attend. I'm fascinated, and I always like to speak to the speakers and assist in what they're doing. So I'm very thankful for your presentations.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So we've had a number of good discussions. So yeah, it's just amazing how these things grow. I remember Davey saying something like, little kids are watching this too. And actually, in that case, children sometimes can pick up quantum mechanics faster than adults because it's the first thing that they're being taught. And I remember seeing a picture in China, 6-year-old kids learning quantum, and then even high schools have quantum computing clubs. Now, for those of you who don't know about the Southern California Quantum Computing Club, I started a provisional medical patent in August. I filed in September. I started this in October last year because I wanted to know about quantum. Like, you can't just say like, oh, quantum's awesome, quantum's awesome. You actually have to research, learn from other people, these types of things. It's a progression, right? And there was levels of uncertainty in the beginning, especially before the two. So IonQ IPO'd on October 1st, and then Rigetti announced plans on October 6th. These are like some of the big quantum hardware vendors. And after the first one, I was excited. After the second one, I said, okay, this is real. You know, if you get one company that IPO'd and the second one comes on and says, we plan to IPO, and then D-Waves, I think almost finished if they're not finished with their IPO. And these are all billion-dollar plus deals, SPAC deals. So yeah, whenever you get into something new, you're not quite sure about, there's always more research to do. And I would say for anybody getting into quantum or still in quantum, just keep doing research because it's just paying off. It's a government initiative. They started funding quantum back in the early 80s. And like I said, the NSF thinks that we'll have a practical quantum computer in 2023. So I'd love to hear about other people's kind of experiences in quantum. Basically, if you just started or you're continuing your journey, and you could go ahead and unmute yourself as well.
I can go.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm new to quantum. I don't really have a whole comprehensive knowledge as much as you guys, but I hope to have one like that one day. And basically what I want to do is leverage quantum marketing, you know, to kind of bring kind of the science behind it, and just not only help myself grow as a person, but help other businesses that could greatly benefit from this, and eventually continue a business, because I do transportation and logistics during the day, and then kind of as a side hustle, I have my own business where I help businesses precisely with marketing issues, especially like small owner operators, like truck drivers that are trying to build up their brand. They're trying to create a presence. And with quantum marketing, what I want to do is kind of learn some of this technical programming side and be able to leverage that into more growth, not only for them, but for myself as well.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, it totally reminds me of when Philip talked. So I'm going to find that. I'll post a link to the channel, and then it'll give you everything. But just look for Philip's video, and then yeah, it's just very interesting because it's like with anything new in technology, everything gets built around it, or maybe even these things around it are building quantum, and probably it's kind of like commensurate in that kind of respect too.
If I may, I guess it's sort of symptomatic. I'm seeing this all over the place. People, you know, somehow stumbling upon quantum, finding quantum, and then just, you know, knowing this is the right thing for me. There's somehow that moment there with quantum more than with other things, at least for certain types of persons. So I suspect that Eduardo and I may have certain psychological features in common that we'll eventually discuss.
Yeah, and a big thumbs up. Awesome. Now, I would say for you, Eduardo, everybody else too, is everything's going to be hybrids. You know, you're not going to have big quantum computers for the most part. It's going to be like a CPU, a GPU, QPU, these types of things with quantum accelerators. So they say 76% of all supercomputers will have some aspect of quantum by the end of 2023. So I've heard it from Worley. He's CEO of StrangeWorks, William Hurley, and he thinks 2023 is going to be the year of quantum. So yeah, it's a good idea to get into it if we're at August. So you have like September, October, November, December. It's really good to get in it now. I mean, even if you wanted to get into conventional computing now, but if you really want to get your feet firm. Now, this week is UC San Diego, Stanford, I think another university, they announced neuromorphic computing. So this is basically borrowing from the brain that does processing and memory at the same time in the same location. So for instance, I think you could have a hybrid quantum computer neuromorphic, because neuromorphic, I think it's conventional, but there's even today's existing technologies like NVIDIA CODA, they're doing CPU, GPU, QPU, quantum processing unit, that you're going to see all these types of different combinations. And they say even in quantum technologies, you might not only just have, say, for instance, gate-based superconducting, ion trap, photonics. You may have several, but for sure, some of them won't make it because they won't be as good. Or like they'll require cooling and, you know, they can't control the air, those types of things. But yeah, in your studies, Eduardo, you know, definitely keep this up. It's worth it. It's panned out for me. Like I said, there was some uncertainty, but the more I study quantum, the more I understand that it's a government initiative. If you went on quantum.gov, there's 21 government institutes associated with quantum. And if they put in $1 billion in 2020, we saw 3.1, I think, in 2020, or that was 2020. And then in 2021, we saw triple what the government puts in. So they've been kind of leading, and then, you know, the industry is definitely responding.
I just wanted to add, Eduardo, you mentioned you're in the transportation industry. In Kevin's group here, going back maybe a month or so, there was a gentleman who came to explain how they were using quantum computing and specifically quantum machine learning and the quantum advantage to optimize machine learning algorithms for trucking companies so that they could come up with the most efficient routes. And now their progress right now is they're talking like somewhere in the 6 to 11% improvement. So for a small company that may not be doable, but for a giant delivery company, if you know, or somebody who's got a burn rate of $1 million a day and they're going to save 6%, it's going to add up 6% a day. So they'll spend the money it takes to get the quantum computing assets lined up to generate these delivery schedules on a daily basis. So they only get 2 hours generally from the beginning of the day to when they've got to have all the delivery routes planned and handed out to their drivers. So the more they can get done in those 2 hours, and if they can use a quantum advantage, get 6%, like I said, 6% of $1 million every day adds up.
Yeah, like Ron said, the gains right now in computing are not awesome. I did research in between 2020 and 2022 in medical. So they're doing, you know, methods, analyses, the frameworks, but since the hardware is not awesome, the results are not going to be awesome. So it's not wasted progress. It's just, it's going through the motions. So it's like when I first started researching quantum, there's a speaker, he said it's like a hockey player taking a slap shot. Like all of a sudden, we have dark horses, Fujitsu. They just announced this week that they announced their first one in Japan, quantum computer. There's so many, we haven't heard too much from neutral atom, just they have the best coherence, but there's so many different technologies in quantum that literally any of these just at any moment can announce, like we had the Xanadu June 1st, kind of like 36 microseconds for a specific task that would have taken 9,000 years. But it's just an amazing field that any of these, they could just have a breakthrough and it's just like, oh, okay. So yeah, it's exciting. So Ron, you had said in the chat, trying to catch up here, Fujitsu announced delivery next year for quantum. You know, Fujitsu's done like a specific type of annealing, I think digital annealing. And so the speaker on Ron you referred to is his name was Elias. I'm not going to attempt his name, but Eduardo or anybody else. And when you look at the YouTube, just search for Elias, the first name. It's really long. Did you have anything? Okay. So as far as like going back to this, as far as getting courses done, edX, EDX is a good place to audit courses. So they'll keep asking you to pay and you just don't. So yeah, it's a normal thing. If you look at other people's profile, I audit courses. I had Ryan Lenahan on, he audits courses. So you just don't get the certificate because you don't pay. So it's not based on merit, like accomplishing a quiz, those types of things. And then I don't actually, so you said it doesn't allow you, so this is for Ron, it appears that LinkedIn does not allow me to list a quantum job title.
Yeah, if I want to list the job title as quantum enthusiast or quantum anything, it's not in their database yet.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, if you want to make those notes, you got to put it somewhere else other than the job title section.
Yeah, I think that'll come.
Sure.
I think sometimes I misspell quantum like QAU, it recognizes those things, but it's just like with anything else. I think all that'll come. Is there any way, we haven't heard from a number of people here, Connie, Thomas, and feel free to unmute yourself. And don't be afraid. Once you start researching this technology, you could be the expert in your office. I would emphasize on like the government stuff and Nature articles, those types of things, because there's a lot of emerging stuff. Even with the nitrogen vacancy diamond crystal quantum sensors that we have now, I remember looking at that and I was like, this isn't anything, right? And it turns out it's been researched. I'm working on my newsletter since like 2015, if not before then. And then I think Philip said in Harvard's lab. So yeah, there's so much stuff out there that would just, the more you research quantum, there's so much behind it as far as like John Martini's, he's like 1982 or 1983 is the same month that I was born. He's squids, Josephine junctions, those types of things. So it's very interesting, but you have to keep that in mind. It's all based on the hardware, right? If the hardware is not awesome, the results won't be awesome. And I don't think anybody can really say we have awesome hardware right now. So.
I have a question for Ron. Ron, were you referring to the Indian gentleman Vinay of Atomic Loops when you were talking about tracking route optimizations, or another person?
That sounds about right. I don't remember the gentleman's name. I'm sure that if you go look at Kevin's
that's a talk I remember well. They were doing Kubo on D-Wave's annealer, right?
Right. They were using D-Wave, and I was
sort of
asking about
optimizing the back propagation.
I think it was the gentleman from Warsaw, the Poland. I think it was a while.
No, I think Philip's right. I think it was a guy from India. He's from the university. Okay. He's from the he studied at the University of Minnesota.
Right. It's Balaji, the gentleman that spoke with him. Is that who you're talking about?
Yes, that's exactly right. Balaji was the speaker after him on the same day.
Yeah.
So that's Vinay Farnis, and their company is called Atomic Loops.
Okay. Awesome. So yeah, I guess the big thing is, we've talked about 2023 being the year of quantum. How do you guys seeing this year finishing strong? Because obviously we're coming out of summer, and usually summer's slow for investing. So I think we'll see some stuff. I think, the Xanadu June 1st thing was a big surprise. And then Classic the next day, June 2nd, they announced we have this awesome, algorithm platform that allows you to do things you could never do on quantum hardware on Amazon's rental cloud. AWS Brickett. So yeah, we'll probably see some surprises. Now, Russ Fine, who's been on twice, he said that he thinks kind of hardware is kind of settled, and then we'll start to see a lot more applications. So medical, neuroscience, all these types of things. There's two speakers too, if you're looking for medical stuff, Eduardo or anybody else. Polaris QP by Shahar Keenan, and then Berend Ra. He did DNA, kind of what he wants to do with DNA and quantum too. So a lot of that stuff is just really hard to do in quantum these days, but you can make approximations and flatten molecules into 2D, these types of things too. So the question is, so there's been 3 Samsung Galaxy quantum phones, not for computing, it's just for security. When do you think we'll start to see mainstream quantum security measures in some of the other manufacturers such as Apple?
Well, Apple is, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Edgewater. Okay, thank you. The Apple is building a $1 billion campus in the North Carolina Technology Triangle. And that triangle includes interest in quantum security, specifically the, as you mentioned, Samsung Galaxy Quantum 3. There's also a military interest in that area. So we may be seeing some things showing up. They may be under NDA. And to the comments you made earlier, there's probably going to be some announcements of work that has been done in terms of press releases. And I think they'll start to pop up as a result of the work that's been steadily going on quietly. Kevin, I just wanted to mention, Connie had asked a question of the scheduled neuroscience speaker, or to chat about that. I mean, you're a neuroscience speaker, Kevin, and I would look forward to any words about that as well.
Yeah, that was a scheduled speaker. So sometimes that just happens. The goal is basically to get more people in neuroscience. Obviously, that's what I'm going into. And it's that whole thing of building that network and finding people that love quantum. So it's that kind of like that education phase. Like the number one, like what is quantum? And then how can they use it in their labs? Those types of things. So the goal with quantum and neuroscience is basically to decrease computation time. First tasks that are already done. And then also to do specific tasks in quantum that you couldn't even dream of before. So a lot of these things tie into not only sensing, so we talked about quantum sensing with this new, like the nature developments, and then also with the with computing. So you can rent time on Amazon Brickett. The top spot is called, it's a ion trap, which is IonQ. So it's 3 cents per shot, those types of things. But yeah, a lot of it's just education, because it's kind of like if you study a different area in science, you know, now you have to think of like ways in computing to apply to different, so you have like EEG, MEG, MRI, those types of things. So yeah, hopefully that helps.
I'm curious, Connie, your reaction to that. It's we haven't met, and I don't know if you announced yourself earlier. Always happy to hear from people.
Yeah, and Connie, there's cognitive, there's computational, there's psychiatric, there's all different types of neuroscience. This field is very, very broad. So probably the biggest avenue for quantum is going to be in computational, and that is very broad in itself. So just imagine that there's existing algorithms with existing technologies. You may be able to have near-term experiments where you're doing data analysis, you're doing a visualization. these types of things that, you know, basically to get your foot in the door is you're looking for those tasks in quantum that are somewhat easier than, or it's easier to do with today's hardware. Now, fully understanding the brain, you know, 10, 20, 30 years out with quantum sensors, quantum computing, you know, transmitting the information over national quantum internets, those types of things. But that, you know, that stuff is kind of further out. Right now, maybe taking the quantum data, EEG data, MEG data, and then interpreting it better with these types of technologies. Yeah, so a lot of these things are broad. So this kind of goes back to a lot of the hybrid stuff that we've been talking about. Is even today, there's hybrid technologies that, you know, if you use neuromorphic computing with other types of technologies too. So yeah, I mean, quantum is just different from these other things that have been announced this week, because I think they still rely on the underlying principles of conventional computing. So, you know, that's the thing. It's like quantum mechanics, quantum bits, entanglement, superpositioning, those types of things as well. Now, is there anybody else that would like to talk or ask questions about kind of like the medical and the quantum thing, or kind of share your experiences? I see we have people come on, Stephen, and feel free to unmute yourself or come on with your video as well.
Okay, so I was just going to say that I got my PhD in physics by doing computational molecular dynamics simulations for protein folding. And so we saw how hard it was for conventional computers, you know, even if you had a lot of money for to buy the good computers. You saw how hard it was for conventional computers, you know, to really do the, you know, the protein folding, because, you know, what you've got is like, you know, thousands of different atoms. And then so with thousands of different atoms interacting with each other, then that's like, you know, hundreds of thousands of like different interactions total. And so, you know, we were able to get some useful results, but it really does look like quantum computers are going to be a lot better for simulating protein folding. That's one of the places I'm looking at for a job, is to do computational research on protein folding using quantum computers.
Yeah, that's very, very helpful. Also, I think it was kind of to ask this question. If you look at, it's called Polaris QB. This is Shahar Keenan. She's the CEO. She's talked on this panel before. Also, Menton AI with 2 E's. They're up in the Bay Area, San Francisco. And Janssen are all focusing on these things. Now, my takeaway is they're doing heavy approximations. Like if you have a 3D molecule, move it into 2D, those types of things. And then Tim said, obviously, protein folding, these types of things. But it's an area of high intrigue, and it's one of those that just might be a while out to do it kind of like effectively, accurately, and not make too many approximations. Just to do caffeine, it's 162 qubits, and penicillin, you're talking about orders of the atoms in the universe. So the million qubit is kind of like on the horizon, or maybe a little bit further away. So we talked a little bit about transportation, and also finance can do kind of optimization problems these days. So yeah, it's like that's relatively less noisy kind of thing. Awesome. So any other questions about medical?
Yeah, I do, Kevin. You're a quantum medical guy. You have a patent pending or something.
Yeah, as with most startups, I've had to pivot. So it's a provisional patent on a medical device. Then I had to pivot to a quantum-based patient monitor. And now investors are starting to reach out to me with the neuroscience because it's a lot more, like I still may insert this into a quantum-based patient monitor, but as far as what I can handle and what else is out there, it seems like this is going well.
Well, that's lovely. So how does what you're doing fit into a medical tricorder?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so actually at the University of California, San Diego, we have a tricorder challenge. For those who don't know, in the original Star Trek, this was a device that could solve any health issue. And it had very archaic LEDs, all this kind of stuff. So that's more like my provisional patent, which is like 20, 30 years out, you know, that kind of technology. Okay. But this is more focusing on like Alzheimer's or potentially Alzheimer's, you know, some dementia, these types of things. So like the breakthroughs that came out this week in quantum sensing, being able to detect magnetic and electrical fields better in a specific, I think it's usually magnetic. It's electromagnetic, but magnetic. So these have a huge impact because they're basically centimeter to millimeter resolution in a rat's heart using this quantum sensor. So if this holds up, it'd have a huge thing because they're saying if it's millimeter detection, you could do things in cardiac. It's similar to EEG as far as like, you know, signals. You could do things in cardiac in potentially humans that you could never do before because now the resolution's better. So I can't stress enough about it as far as these sensors, the two Nature articles that I shared, because one's sound waves, another one's like an invasive rat heart surgery with quantum diamond sensor, that these things have the potential just to change the whole medical field. And even today, they have coherence problems. So if you have like 300, I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, Ron, it's like 0.3, so 300 microseconds maybe, so 0.3 milli in coherence. So obviously that's...
It depends on the qubit technology. I believe they got much longer, like in the seconds for like trapped ions, or some of the trapped ions.
Yeah.
But like all of the superconducting stuff is really short. Yeah.
Yeah, with any emerging technology, this one, in this article, I read it twice and I'm like, okay, there's not too much wrong with it besides coherence. There's some other problem with some amplifier that they used, and it's, you know, adding additional noise, but it doesn't seem that far off. So I would encourage anybody to take a look at those and just keep your eyes peeled, especially in Nature publications, science. There's a lot out there.
So Kevin, your medical device, are you a ways from worrying about certification or acceptance?
Well, right now it's more algorithms. So kind of defining, you know, what to do. I still need the brain data. The call to action is to collaborate with other neuroscientists, and it could be anywhere in the US. It could. So the pitch deck is out. I've designed all these experiments and, you know, how to insert quantum into these potential areas of, you know, slowness in neuroscience experiments. So I've done a bunch of those. So yeah, it always takes more work. That's the key.
Kevin, I'm
sorry. It sounds like you're waiting for the right hardware to make the thing a reality, or?
I mean, not necessarily, because even with sensing and even with algorithms too, design these algorithms in anticipation of a certain spec.
Well, it sounds good. It sounds like you're doing the software, so you'll be out in front of whatever happens. So that's good.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
May I, Kevin, I have a question for you, since you know, you're an expert on the chemistry side of quantum. I wonder if you've seen a recent, like a month or publication by John Preskill and Lin and others that says no exponential speed up in quantum simulation. No evidence for it. It's not going to happen.
Oh, I saw that too.
It's in Nature or something. You know, I have the link.
Kevin,
I'm
your
sorry,
audio
I
dropped
lost.
off.
Kevin, if I couldn't hear the last thing you said.
Well, just, you know, the basis.
They evaluated the evidence for what they claim is the most common problem in quantum chemistry, which is computing the ground state of a molecule.
Okay.
And they've reviewed all the evidence there is of any claims that there is, you know, that there are for such things, and they say that there is no grounds for optimism. So they say that quantum computers may be useful for quantum simulation, and they don't deny that they're like, at least I haven't read the whole thing, but I don't think they deny that there may be like logarithmic or quadratic speed up. It's specifically about exponential speed up.
Okay, so kind of to catch everybody up is like the easiest to do is called quantum annealing. So that's D-Wave, they commercialized in 2011. They do it left and right. They're sending this technology up to the space station in little forms, right? And then on the far end, to do all this stuff with like gate-based superconducting qubits, these types of things, with exponential speed up algorithms is what he's talking about. So he's saying basically like the ground state, there's an issue like somewhere, you know, basically simulating, and this isn't quantum computing simulation. This is simulating actual reactions, molecules, pharmaceutical interactions inside a quantum computer. And that they're saying that, you know, there's an issue with that now. So I would have to read more. And there's McKinsey reports basically saying big pharma wants to do the first third of their R&D in like a quantum computer, right? Like leads and basically screening, all that kind of stuff too. So yeah, it's interesting. So did you have the link, Phil?
Yeah, I'm gonna post it in a second.
Yeah, and Phil also said it doesn't mean that it won't have quantum advantage. It just might not be the thing that we're thinking is like the best thing. Like,
yeah,
right. Like far and away, those types of things. So feel free to post more questions in the chat. Now, I was kind of interested because I asked, like, what do people think as far as, you know, the biggest application in quantum in healthcare? And I did get some good results. It's hard to get from my phone, but if you remember those, if you're coming from Meetup and would like to share or ask, you do in the chat, or you can, you know, come off video and audio too as well. Okay, so Ron asked a question. He says, I'd like to see a definition of quantum sensor. It seems like the meaning is in the eye of the beholder. This is kind of true. So MRIs and lasers are technically quantum sensors. So anywhere along the way, if you're operating on the principles of quantum mechanics, you're called a quantum sensor. That's my understanding. So I would say the ones out today are kind of like the next gen quantum sensors. So where we had magnetoencephalography, if we have this, you know, nitrogen vacancy diamond quantum sensor, even replace this thing that people are crazy about, MEG, in specific, one that can fit on the dome of your head instead of like a full device kind of stuff. So I appreciate the link. So everybody check out that link. Yeah, John Preskill is definitely kind of like a familiar name. Well, it's interesting. It says, is there evidence for exponential quantum advantage? So I wouldn't say, you know, it for sure rules it out. So at the bare minimum, we would have quantum advantage. At the best, we'd have at a qubit, you're doubling information even past 1 million qubits kind of thing. All right, any other questions? Any other questions for anybody else in here too? Like again, we have, so Dave's returning, Ron's returning, Austin's returning, Philip. I encourage anybody else not to be bashful. There's no bad question in quantum. And a lot of times it might be really, really good. Yeah, go ahead, Austin.
Oh, okay. So by the way, awesome and happy to hear about your work and the patent pending. I hope you get it and the patent office moves quickly on it. So my question in regards to with your algorithm, I'm kind of curious from the chemistry side or the censoring side, when you are creating these algorithms, are you manually putting in these thresholds, or are the algorithms figuring out what those thresholds are themselves? Like, for example, like for a neuron to fire, you know, it has to reach a certain threshold, you know, for it to go. Are the algorithms that they're writing right now figuring that out on their own, or is it being manually coded in?
Yeah, so the goal right now is just to focus on all the data coming off existing EEG, MEG, MRI, whatever. So everything's in pitch decks. With another colleague, we've done quantum experiments, but it was just with simulated data, that kind of stuff. So it all had, you know, it hasn't happened yet. I would need like brain data, and like I said, the call to action is to get other neuroscientists too. And then also see what's going slow for them as well, and kind of get things going, and maybe have like the big project a little bit later.
Okay, awesome. Then still excited for it.
Yeah, appreciate it. If you want, you can tell people about your background.
Well, currently I'm an EEG technologist. I work for the Veterans Association right now. I just built a new EEG department here in Pennsylvania for them that they're doing tele-EEGs now. So they're trying to start that up for some of our smaller centers because veterans are very dispersed. So trying to reach them all and get them the care that they need.
Very cool. So are these like helmets that they wear? They send the patient home with it?
I wish it was a helmet. Unfortunately, everybody's skull seems to be different. So everything has to be measured. The measurements have to be standardized. So there has to be a certain distance between each electrode or lead. Otherwise, you get some funky signals back. So unfortunately, there's not a one-size-fits-all helmet. Right now, we're still measuring heads ourselves and having them come in and putting it on manually.
Okay, but are they at home when they're doing EEG?
Yes, we do. We can wrap their head with gauze. We'll usually take a gauze wrap and we'll wrap their head and put some glue on it. It stays.
Interesting. So for those that don't know, there's this big thing with MEG. So EEG is for electro, MEG is for magnetic. So MEGs, there's only what, like 20, 30 around the country, right, Austin?
Yeah. Yep.
And these things are big, but they're not quite as big as an MRI. So say, for instance, the developing technology is called OPM MEG, which is literally a flexible helmet that you put on patient. And then, you know, it's room temperature. It doesn't take this liquid helium cooling kind of stuff. So it's interesting because this is really picking up speed. Now, keep in mind, it's to measure magnetic fields. So if quantum sensors come around and also measure magnetic fields maybe a little bit better, it would kind of put the kibosh on OPM potentially. So that's the thing. It's like they call OPM MEG a quantum sensor because it's like optically pumped OPM. I forget what the M is, but basically they say it uses some aspect of quantum mechanics in the spinning of these molecules or atoms. So that's what they call it, a quantum sensor, because it's quantum mechanics. So it's very interesting because there's certain things you can get from electrical information, certain things you can get from magnetic. And obviously MRI is kind of like a huge thing too. Did you have something, Austin?
Oh, no, that was just background. I'm sorry.
So yeah, so with MRI, NYU Langone, which is a hospital, and Fermilab announced partnerships to incorporate quantum technologies into MRIs. At bare minimum, it'd be for optimizing things because that's what's working today. So there's a good link for that. But it's just the sign of the times. It's just like not only does the government, fully behind it, industry, and then you have now medical and everything. Yes, we'll have to get approval, but it's a government initiative, so it shouldn't be like reinventing the wheel. So anybody else kind of news or any other questions?
I was just going to mention the Inflation Reduction Act has a lot of money in there for climate change help. And I don't know if a lot of people realize, but it does seem that a lot of the jobs, a lot of the stuff that's going on in quantum computing is actually for the energy sector. That's actually the first recruiter that ever contacted me for a quantum computing job was a recruiter for BP, British Petroleum. So that's an important thing. The energy sector.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Who was it recently? I mean, BASF. Trying to think who else. I know Pascal's had a number of partnerships with these things. Like Rigetti has nuclear fusion. So yeah, that's big. And I can't think off the top of my head who else, but obviously if you're tying kind of transportation in, there's been optimization with like Toyota, kind of like, but it's more like spring damping on their shocks. But yeah, look at D-Wave's, it's called their 250 plus practical applications. And this goes for anybody. They're not awesome, right? Like Ron said, maybe 4 or 5%. But it's worth checking out if you just want to see a ton of stuff that has happened for quantum annealing.
Okay. I have one question for Kevin and Tim about the protein folding stuff. I remember seeing, and this is going back 10 or more years, somebody came up with the concept of taking protein folding problems and rolling them into some sort of online game, and then getting people hooked on the game. And what they were doing is they were using their human brains to fold proteins, although they may not even have known that's what they were doing. Can you guys think of anything comparable to that scenario that would help quantum today? This is obviously a very open-ended question.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen these. So you're saying just by they have something hooked up, either electrical or magnetic, and then it's sensing their movements? Because I've seen people.
No, it's like a video game. It's just like on the web, and it's sort of like a fancier version of Tetris or Rubik's Cube or something like that. They play the game, they try to get more points, and every time they get to a level, they get a more complicated problem. But again, they probably don't realize what they're doing is folding proteins. They may have thought of this is a knot game.
Yeah.
And
you're saying just for the pure fun of it, but also science is involved?
Well, I mean, I'm convinced that people that did that thought, let's just see if we get any good solutions. Because you got all these human brains working on a protein fold. Odds are maybe somebody will get it. But I'm just wondering if there's any way of leveraging that same kind of concept to get quantum challenges figured out, or if there's some also relationship, can you replace the human intelligence there with quantum advantage or that sort of thing?
Yeah, like the furthest I saw with that is MET-AI. I think they had like 200, it's on D-Wave's site, 284 amino acid residues. And then Janssen, like they only had like 10 or something like, which is Johnson Johnson. And then the other one, so Shahar does that stuff and she wants to do, you know, machine learning, AI, personalized medicine, and quantum all in the same package. But yes, what you're talking about has enormous value because understanding in the body how proteins are folded can give much insight as far as what drugs to use, like for lead generation, all that kind of stuff. So I would, you know, in quantum, I don't think we're close with that yet. But it sounds fun. It reminds me of the game like Kinect on the Microsoft Xbox, where you're controlling things with your hands and you know, moving things around, that kind of stuff.
But the participants were playing a game. They didn't realize they were solving a problem. I mean, whoever put the game out is collecting all the results, and
they're for free.
It's like crowdsourcing or crowdfunding or something. They were crowd analyzing.
Yeah, it reminds me of caffeine, 162 qubits, just to display it in a quantum computer. It's 24 atoms, just to display. So when you're talking about proteins, what is it, Tim? Like, it's usually not as much as DNA. I think it's like thousands of grams per mole in molecular weight, whereas maybe up there, but I don't think it's like millions. But to account for all that and spinning, you know, transverse, translational, all these types of things in space, that might be a while. But sections, you know, what they do is they approximate, so they just look at specific areas, you know, of proteins and that type of stuff, and that's probably what you will see. Is they'll just not neglect, but they won't pay attention to the bulk of the molecule, just like the single portion kind of thing.
Well, I'm confident there'll be a future in that. I mean, there's already people making some sort of headway with not just protein folding, but molecule selection and all that stuff.
Yeah, the cool stuff I would check out. Microsoft keeps going at it. It's this whole catalysis for converting CO2 into methanol and water kind of thing. So the ruthenium catalyst is not that big, you know, speaking relative to these, you know, biomolecules that we're talking about. So they said that they got to the end of it and then they needed 4,000 logical qubits. So that might be a while away too, in order to solve this problem for the best catalyst to get all the CO2 out of the air.
Oh, definitely an energy problem.
Yeah, the video games. The video games actually does sound good. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, you can get information from people who are doing video games, even if they don't really understand the material that well. Because when we did protein folding, it's kind of like we were playing video games. We had this, you know, this real graphical stuff, and then we were trying out, you know, these different things and stuff, and just kind of, you know, guessing and stuff. So like with quantum, the idea is that you have, you know, like perhaps like thousands of different states or different like paths for, you know, something to go through. So if you had someone who was like sort of directing like a certain path, you know, find the best path for, you know, this ligand, you know, to go inside of this protein and then attach somewhere. And so you could figure out like all the different hypothetical paths just from a video game that people were playing. And it kind of reminds me of a problem that we did in physics called the Brickistachrone. I don't know if you've heard of that. basically it's a bead on a wire, and you have to figure out the shape of the wire so that the bead takes the least amount of time to go from like a certain place to like another place, and then it uses the force of gravity to push it. So how would you make that bead? And so I mean, we were able to analytically do it, but then when it comes to quantum, a lot of times you can't just analytically just solve it. And so it can be just sort of guessing like different shapes or different paths. So, and then you probably get a lot more information from video games than you are from science, because there's actually more people playing video games than there is people doing science.
Yeah, so what I'm thinking is, if we can come up with a way to visualize or visualization mechanism for quantum algorithms that can be related to like Tetris or a Rubik's Cube, or just a knot untying game, whether we crowdsource this and come up with people, again, they don't realize what they're doing is solving quantum algorithms. They're just playing the game and racking up points.
Yes. Yeah, that actually does sound good.
Something to think about.
Into Dave's comment too, there's children who are creating their impression of quantum as TikTok videos, based on what he tells them about quantum. I mean, it sounds like you guys are onto something.
Well,
yeah,
generations.
fun. So there is current technology where you can type on a computer with your mind, not using any limbs for paraplegics, and then so they can draft emails just on what they're thinking. So a lot of this is, and Austin may know too, especially Austin probably knows, there's a lot of probably cool stuff out today. I don't know if you want to comment on that, Austin?
Oh, with regards to?
Well, not only for the greater good, but like for people that want to write emails that can't use their limbs, but also kind of tying in with maybe if it's for pleasure, these types of things as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That they've been inventing tools left and right, and I think there was just some news recently about a gentleman who just set a record for the longest time, or longest amount of time in a go, using one of these tools. So it worked consistently for the longest period of time. I guess they have to turn it off after a while, but that was very neat. You have software that can read the eyes, where they can type that way. It'll watch their eye movement and it'll match it to the word on the screen. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of applications and tools in many different ways, other than putting an electrode on someone's head, which that you can get around that.
Yeah, and I would think for anything emerging is you have to do your research. 9 times out of 10, it already exists. The other thing is like classical. I saw a Intel video, and he said that he believes that Moore's law will never end. So they're developing all these like transistors with like butterfly, like things sticking out the sides, that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's worth checking out. And maybe for me, I've learned is basically look for the things that absolutely can never be done classically, theoretically, if we have the hardware, and focus your quantum advantage on that. Because like I said, we've been developing conventional computers for, since Homebrew Computer Club, all that kind of stuff. And they've gotten better. They will get better, these types of things, but just, find the things in specific that quantum will, in theory, be, unbeatable in 5 or 10 years, these types of things. All right, any other last kind of questions or comments? I appreciate the new people. It's okay. if you haven't talked too much. Eduardo, do you have anything?
I was just going to mention, going back to two things. One is a comment, one is a question. So the comment is, so talking about gathering crowds for the video games and solving the algorithms, like, and mentioning what Dave said about TikTok, is Generation Z is huge on TikTok. They're huge, and this could be a great way to kind of maybe post a video out there saying like, hey, if you can solve this puzzle, you know, or something like that, or something on any social media, what have you, and just say like, hey, can you solve this? People like doing that. Like there was a problem. I can't remember what exactly it was, but it was basically to solve a math problem, and it was kind of like this viral thing that went through Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn, I believe. And maybe doing kind of pop-up things like that. And like you said, because people aren't even realizing they're doing this, because the moment they do, they're going to overcomplicate it. But if they don't realize it, then they're able to look at it a different way, because they're thinking they're doing one thing, but in reality, they're doing another, and they're helping solving something else. So just kind of food for thought as far as comments go. And then the question I had was, so you guys mentioned that sometimes children pick up quantum a little bit quicker. And is that because they're more exposed to programming and the you know, kind of the math problems that go with that? Or what do you attribute it to, and what articles are out there to maybe help someone like myself that I don't really have that much knowledge in quantum, but I can start picking it up?
Yeah, I mean, my interpretation. Okay, does somebody have something else? Philip?
No, didn't mean to interrupt you, Kevin. I just had something to say, but I'm happy to say it after you.
Yeah, my interpretation is they just haven't learned these like hardcore university physics courses, and you know, teleportation, quantum teleportation, these types of things. Is once it gets ingrained in your head, especially like the smarter you are, it really kind of contradicts like the laws of, I don't know, Tim, like classical physics, right? So yeah, that's my interpretation. So go ahead, Philip.
Yeah, so I happen to know some very cool people in Europe who are doing quantum games as a pedagogical technique, on the assumption that, you know, quantum is really difficult and kind of boring, not to me, but I think maybe to the average like technical student in a university. So like they want to do this little dance and entice these students with the idea that you can learn quantum ideas by playing these games. So they're constructing really cool games from that point of view. And I'm actually very interested in quantum pedagogics and how this stuff is taught at all the stages of the educational process as I'm progressing through it myself. That's one thing. I forget what the other thing Eduardo said was, but I also had something to say. The second thing?
The TikTok. Oh, no, the articles, sorry. Articles about, you know, how someone like me, that I have no background in physics whatsoever. My background is primarily business and sales and marketing. So
oh yeah, I get it. So there are so many resources out there now at all levels of, you know, imaginable, of quantum, you know, awareness and so on. And I try to produce some of them too at my own level. You know, we should chat sometime soon. Yeah, I'll be happy to share some of that stuff.
Saturday.
Appreciate it. Anybody else that we haven't heard from? And again, thanks for the new people coming. Rizka, Asal, Musa. I said Musa, come on. So we're about to log off. Musa, if you have any kind of like questions or comments, you can download today's chat by opening the chat and then clicking on the triple dot. So there's links in there, good material as well. This will be posted afterwards on the YouTube channel. If I can get to the link here. But again, I'd like to hear your feedback. Obviously, this is going more medical, because that's what I researched, you know, medical or, you know, neuroscience, and then also quantum. But I developed a 235 source quantum timeline that kind of like helped me understand quantum. So it's now to collaborate with neuroscientists. So here's the videos. So if you're looking for specific things, you know, you could research on LinkedIn who does what. There's been a number of speakers, like I said, Shahar Keenan. She does kind of drug discovery, kind of protein kind of stuff. And then Brand Ra, he does DNA. So those types of things. But yeah, you can check that out. And, you know, like I said, I appreciate everybody coming. So this is episode 45. And have a good rest of your night. Have a good, productive week. Oh, we got something here? Oh, so thank you, Eduardo.
Thank you. And I hope we can have Sneha some other time.
Yeah. So if I hear from her, I'll let you know. And then, so that's the push, is basically to get a bunch of neuroscience professors on that can talk about slow processes in their labs. A lot of, you know, it's just, I kind of have to break through more on neuroscience, but, you know, updates to be posted. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
Take care, bye.
All right.
You too, Kevin. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thanks.